we have way fewer units than New York. So here we have less than 10,000 units of public housing, while in New York there's something like 165,000. And so the thing I wanted to really draw attention to when you're talking about things like the eradication of homelessness is that here we have no cushion for people who are falling out of the housing market. And it is a brutal housing market. It is a market where 600,000 people across LA County are paying something like 90% of their income in rent. It is absolutely brutal. And we have created a situation where people have no options. We have no options. The waiting list for Section 8 vouchers is years long. I think the last time that housing voucher applications opened, they were absolutely inundated with people who needed assistance with housing. It is the most important and the most burdensome expenditure that people have. And we've actually designed a city and a county where we have left people who are facing those kinds of expenditures with absolutely no option and no means to address it, except for becoming homeless or leaving entirely. And I think that is criminal. And it is easy to address. You know, we can build public housing again. We can invest in housing vouchers. We can invest in affordable housing again.
Looking at the Democratic primary right now, is there one candidate who stands out in terms of really addressing this issue head on?
I have been really incredibly excited by Bernie Sanders' campaign, which has really centered housing policy in a way. He signed on to the Homes Guarantee recently, and I was actually there when he signed on to it, which was incredibly exciting. Both Bernie Sanders and Ilhan Omar are talking about public housing again, are talking about massive numbers of public housing units. I believe the Homes Guarantee is calling for 12 million units of public housing to be built across the country. The Sanders campaign is calling for 10 million. Either way, these are staggering numbers, so much more than what has been built in recent years. And the idea that we are not just thinking about public housing again, but demanding that it be built in cities across America is really, I think, going to have a transformative effect on how we think about housing and homelessness going forward.
But even if Bernie won, we still need that local engagement and representation because there's only so much he can do at a federal level. So just discuss those limitations and why it's so necessary to do what you're doing and be involved in things like this.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the Sanders campaign has been amazing in terms of just opening up the imagination of people, in terms of raising expectations for what your government should be doing for you. I think the idea, which should not be radical, that you deserve health care, that everyone should have health care, that everyone should have a house. These are things that are now becoming part of what people's hopes are, what people's expectations are for what their government should be doing. Like, whether or not Sanders gets elected at the national level, I feel like we need to have people at the local level who can translate those rights into reality, because if we have people at City Hall who are still beholden to the real estate industry, who have a really narrow vision for what the city should be doing, for how we should be responding to residents and how we should be helping residents, then I think all those goals will go unrealized at the local level. And that's why I think it's so important for people to do it all. I mean, it's hard because I know people have limited attention for political activity, and I think they feel pulled in a lot of different directions because there's so much happening right now. But I really do think taking local action is incredibly important and can potentially have the most transformative impact. What you're doing at the local level can change the street you're walking on, can change the house you're living in, can change the city around you, can open up the possibilities for you on a very, very immediate level. And I hope, at least, that idea is empowering for people and inspiring for people, because that's the only way it's going to happen.
design has changed. It's gone from this to this, and it's still not easy. But these Aussies are here to fix design, starting out in Mel's family living room, then the garage. They never gave up on their mission to empower everyone to design. And so, Canva was born. It made design simple, and it took off. Big time. Every day, over 4 million designs are made by people unleashing their creativity, from students with opinions to moms with a side hustle. Ooh, that's nice. To those crushing it at work. And the designers, they love us too.
Don't you? Sure, I use Canva. I mean, it's free. There are millions of premium photos and videos, over 70,000 professional templates to get you started, or you can make your own from scratch. It's so easy. Non-designers can do it.
Non-designers, like Margot.
Wow, Margot. Took a lot of time here.
She doesn't. We believe in design for everyone, but don't take it from us. Take it from some of the 20 million people that use Canva every month. This is Mel, Cliff, and Cam, and this is Canva. Create a free account today at canva.com.
You give your best every day. No matter what the day brings, just check these supplies out. Find it at Staples. You should have the best. Click here to shop now.
Boom, and we're live. Hello, Kyle.
Hello, Joe Rogan. You look very good there in a suit. Thank you. You know, I like to pretend that I'm a serious human being by wearing this, but I'm just a dick.
Well, you're a youngish fellow, so maybe a suit would give you more of an air of composure,
Yeah.
authority, perhaps.
That's the idea. If you look like you're really serious, then people assume you're serious, and
Yeah.
they don't know that I'm, making dick jokes and
Exactly.
bullshit like that.
That's a good move. It's a very
Yeah.
smart move.
Yeah, it
I've
works
actually had some suits made. I had to do this function for one of my kids' schools, and I had to go to this function. We had to wear nice clothes. It's like a dress-up thing. And I don't really have nice clothes, nothing that like fits. So I had to have something made. So now I've been wearing it when I go on special dates with Mrs. Rogan.
So it's like, it's a suit like this? It's a
Nice suit jacket, tailored, the whole deal. Fits me.
And how do you feel when you put it on? Do you feel like, I'm official now?
I'm a serious person. I feel like a serious person. Like
Yeah.
if I dress like this, like a hoodie and a t-shirt, I feel like a schlub. I feel like a dork. Like I am.
There's this thing that I do where, especially when I'm doing my show, oftentimes you do the half-ass move where I look like this,
But you have
then I might
shorts
have
on
basketball
underneath.
shorts on, or I might have sweatpants.
Do you do that?
Sometimes, yeah, sure. It all depends on what mood I'm in. I mean, sometimes I'll do the whole thing and look nice, but usually I'm just being lazy and
Guy Ritchie was on the podcast and he made a very good statement in defense of the suit. It was a really interesting sort of testimony in defense of the suit and the pocket square. He's a big believer of the pocket square, which I think is preposterous.
yeah, it's a little too far.
Yeah, it's too far. I'm with you.
But it doesn't go out of style. That's the
No.
thing, is like if you look at a picture of somebody from like 1906 and you look at a picture of somebody from 2018 and they're wearing a suit, you go, oh, okay. But then other aspects of style and fashion change so fast. I mean, you
Yeah.
look at, remember I think they were called Chenkos, like the really baggy jeans that people wore?
Oh yeah, like Cavaricci's.
I don't know what that is. Is that like
Cavaricci's
Chenkos?
was something that we used to wear. I'm dating myself. This is like in the early 90s, late 80s, early 90s. It was like they were tight to like your pelvic region, and then they would flare up when they got past
like
the hips.
MC Hammer
Yes,
pants?
yes.
So terrible.
Yeah, but those didn't really make it, right? And then but they did make it in the gym. Like if you go to the gym, there's still guys who wear these kind of sweatpants.
That's right.
That are like these kind of puffy sweatpants.
And they're usually juiced out of their minds, right?
Mhm.
And
So
like,
they're
this
so
is
big.
these are the workout clothes everybody wears.
They probably wear those pants because there it is. There's Cavaricci's.
Oh
There's-
my
look
God.
at that. I used to wear those. Try to get laid.
You
wear
wore
whatever you
those?
could. Yes, I
That's the opposite of trying to get laid.
Not in those days. Back in those days, like people didn't know any better.
Right,
It
but
was
that
like
goes to my
powdered
point,
wigs.
is that things change, except powdered wigs, exactly. Like, people
Do you
like
know
to
where
bring
that came from?
No,
We
where?
found out on the podcast. It came from syphilis. Yes, the whole wig thing came out of royalty. These royals had syphilis. What was the whole story? It was about the term big wig. And it was, who were the people? Was it Dutch kings? Who were the kings? See if you can find that story. Because it's a fascinating story. What it was there was these, I think they were brothers, and they had syphilis. They were just banging everybody. Yeah, why do people wear powdered wigs? And it all came from a hair loss that these guys would have. There it goes. The Peruk story begins, like many others, with syphilis. By 1580, the STD had become the worst epidemic to strike Europe since the Black Death, according to William Clows, C-L-O-W-E-S. How would you say that?
Either one, close, I'd say.
An infinite multitude of syphilis patients clogged London's hospitals, and more filtered in each day. Without antibiotics, victims faced the full brunt of the disease. Open sores, nasty rashes, blindness, dementia, and patchy hair loss. Baldness swept the land.
So that's them saying, I'm healthy, I'm healthy.
Well, it just became a thing because these, scroll down so it'll tell you like who the people were that did it. Yeah, so it was, what, went a little too far. Yeah, and so syphilis outbreak sparked a surge of wig making, victims hid their baldness, blah, 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 blah. Louis XIV was only 17 when his mop started thinning. Worried that his baldness would hurt his reputation, Louis hired 48 wig makers to save his image. 5 years later, the King of England, Louis's cousin, Charles II, did the same thing when his hair started to gray. Both men likely had syphilis. Courtiers, how do you say that? Courtiers, and other aristocrats immediately copied the two kings. They sported wigs, and the style trickled down to the upper middle class. Europe's newest fad was born. So that's where it came from. So the whole powdered wigs with people of distinction in court, all that shit came from syphilis, which, like most things.
Well, whenever somebody tries to, kind of like deify the founding fathers, I always think, well, yeah, they were brilliant on some things, but on the other hand, they wore powdered wigs and shat in outhouses and had slaves.
Yeah.
So, like, there's a little bit of a balance that we have to take into consideration there.
Well, I mean, think about how much cultural change has taken place in our society just over the last few years.
Sure.
I mean, words that were commonplace are now completely unacceptable. The styles of behavior and methods of expression are being criticized and critiqued in this really radical way. And I think it's good. Ultimately, I think there's a lot of back
To an
and
extent,
forth.
I'd say it's good, but
The sentiment is good. I think the reaction and some of the overreaction, like, there's a spectrum, right? There's always going to be, like, did you see there was something that came out yesterday from Portland State University where Peter Boghossian and James Damore, the Google Memo guy, and Heather Hines, she was a professor at Evergreen State.
I remember with the Jordan Peterson thing.
Yes,
Sure.
and she was actually on my podcast last week with her husband, Brett Weinstein. Can't say Weinstein.
Oh, so I'm not thinking of the same person. I was thinking of the person who got fired because of...
She did not get
Oh,
fired.
she didn't get fired, but
She
they criticized her for playing a Jordan Peterson thing. Is that the same person?
No,
Oh, okay, sorry.
that's Lindsay.
Okay, right, Lindsay something,
or other.
yeah, sure.
She was in a different university.
Okay.
Laurier?
Yeah, Canada.
Yeah, in Canada. Another university in Canada. This is in Portland. Anyway, so they're in the middle of this conversation, and Heather, who is she's a biologist, and she starts going over the biology of the differences between males and females that are just undeniable. And these kids get up, and they start yelling that this is bullshit, and fuck you, and power to the people, all this crazy shit, and then they tip over the sound system, and they're the most hilarious, classical, liberal, progressive lefties. Green hair, the guy has like this puffy afro, and he's like, we don't tolerate Nazis, man. Like, there's fucking Nazis, these are biologists, you piece of shit.
That stuff is the kind of stuff that I think turns people off to the left.
Yes.
And almost provides a gateway to the right, where all of a sudden people can buy into an even broader right-wing ideology. Because if you look at the left, and that's your perception of the left, is it's the people with the pink hair or the blue hair, and they're just going around, and their whole point is to deplatform people or censor people or scream about Ben Shapiro or whatever the case is. Like, my whole thing is, if you're on the left, and I think most lefties do this to be fair, put the identity politics aside, okay, and let's talk about the things that we actually already have a majority of the American people with us on. So, like a classic left-wing idea. let's have a living wage. The minimum wage is not a living wage right now. You could work full time and not make enough money to survive. Well, if you're on the left and you go out there and you talk about we need to fight to try to get a living wage and make our government work for us, well, then you get everybody to agree with you. Even most Republicans agree with you. And you can go down the list, whether it's legalizing marijuana, 60% of the American people are now with us. Ending the wars, there was a poll that came out in 2013, so it's old, admittedly, but only 17% of the American people still wanted to be in the war in Afghanistan. And we're still there today. I'd imagine, if anything, that number probably dropped even further, and everybody's like, what are we doing in Afghanistan?
Right. But isn't the problem with polls is when you ask people about it, you're not asking them if they're informed. You're just asking.
Yeah, you're just asking their opinion on it, sure.
Right. Well, what I was saying is about the left versus the right is that the real problem is anybody can be on either. So you're going to get these people that are going to disrupt this Heather Heying, lecture on biology from an informed scientific perspective, and like, fuck this, man, this patriarchy. You're going to get that. But you're also going to get people like yourself. You're also going to get people that are aware of the issues and educated and are debating this in a very public way and trying to figure out what's the best possible solution to these things. The problem is, anytime you have a group, whether it's, pick the group, gun owners, vegans, whatever, anybody can fucking join, man.
Sure.
And as soon as anybody can join, you can't look at like the worst case scenarios, the green-haired dork that kicks over the microphone because they don't like the idea that Heather is speaking logically about biology. Like, you have to look at like the whole thing.
Sure.
And we don't like to do that. We like to point at the green-haired dork and say, hey, liberals, there's your left.
Sure, exactly. And, the breakdown to me is, when you look at somebody like that, they're in the category of what I would call authoritarian left, because they want to control other people's actions. They want to shut down that speech and say, your ideas are so dangerous, I don't even want to hear it. There's a whole other contingent of the left, which again, I would argue is probably the majority of the left, which is the libertarian left, which is people like me and many others who say, listen, live and let live on social issues. I'm never, even though I don't agree with Stephen Crowder or Ben Shapiro on anything, I'm never gonna, try to protest to get them to not speak their mind at a school.
It's foolish.
It is, and it makes it look like you don't have an argument when you say, I can't let that guy talk. And then they get to go around and say, I'm so persecuted because I'm right.
Right.
Meanwhile, I say, okay, you want to have somebody like that go speak at college? Sure, fine, let him speak. Let me get the speech after.
Well,
that's good enough.
I think open conversations are critical. And this is going to probably be unpopular. I don't think the way to do it is in front of a large group of people. I think you open yourself up to a lot of grandstanding, a lot of saying things just for applause breaks, there's a lot of bullshit. It changes the nature of the conversation because it becomes theater. You're doing this thing in front of all these people, and you can hear a lot of these times people say things. Like, I'm a comic, so I know when someone's saying things for a reaction.
Right.
You're like, there's a way you do it where you say it like this, and that's what we want. And everybody goes, yeah! You do not talk like that when it's just you and a person. When it's just you and a person, you are just alone with your ideas. And I think that is the way a guy like Ben Shapiro and, whoever you want on the left should have a discussion.
Yeah. There's something about that's sophistry, so you're not creating the best argument, you're just trying to sound like you have the best argument. And, Bill Maher, for example, does this where he's very good at the punchy one-liners.
Sure.
Like, he's in a conversation with his panel on his show, and they'll be like, ba-ba-ba-ba, and there was,
That's his style.
Well, you didn't really say anything. You just it was like a quick, partisan, hacky point you made, but since people already agree with you in the audience, they clap.
Right.
So it's harder to flesh out the ideas and really. That's why, listen, I've always said, I'm not the biggest fan of debate. So I've done a few debates, and people online like when I do debates, but I'm not the biggest fan of debates because I think it's like the WWE of intellectual pursuits, where you go in, this person's whole point is to defend this side of it, my job is to defend the other side of it, and it's like, okay, clash. But it's like, okay, well then, when we come across an issue like the fucking 64 genders on Facebook or whatever it is, and I actually might agree, am I now put in a position where I'm supposed to be like, no, I'm going to disagree because that's the format of the thing that we're doing?
Right,
it's just weird, and it's not normal.
Yeah, and I think that's actually very important for both sides to do. Like, when there's something on your side that you disagree with, you should be honest about it. And even saying that there's a side, that there's sides, that there's our side versus their side. I think we're so inherently tribal. that we should resist any temptation whatsoever to form teams, especially about critical issues, like really important social issues, really important economic issues, really important civil rights issues. It's just things that we should just talk about without looking at them in terms of, oh, the left wants this, so I oppose it, or the right wants this, so I have to figure out ways to mock it.
Yeah, I don't even know what to say in response to that. I agree with that.
It's just, you know, we were talking about this before the podcast, that like, what I try to do is have conversations with everyone. I try to have conversations with nutty people like Alex Jones. I try to have conversations with rational people like Sam Harris. I try to have conversations with all kinds of people, but without fail, every time I have a left-wing person on, I'm some cuck left-wing, you know.
It's going to happen, sure.
And every time I have a right-wing person on, I'm some alt-right Nazi apologist. It's like this weird inclination we have to try to label and categorize people, and I try to resist those labels as much as humanly possible.
Well, I feel like what you're really good at is you can have on people who disagree completely on stuff, but you'll kind of find a nugget of agreement in the conversation with that person, and then you can expand on that, and you can end up having a very nice conversation. And you never really bring anybody on to try to like browbeat them and tell them that they're wrong on this issue or that issue. You know what I mean?
I have no desire to do that. I don't know. I mean, look, I've had a lot of arguments in my life, and I don't like them. I don't think they're beneficial. I mean, I think debate is good, but every time I've ever been in an argument with someone, like a real argument, I always come out of it feeling gross.
Yeah.
There are times in life where arguments are necessary. There's times in life where you're just faced with aggression or conflict, and you have to do something about it. You have to meet it head on. There are times in life like that. But whenever you can avoid that, do. And I think a lot of what arguments are, and I've failed at this in my life many times, but a lot of what arguments are is the way you've reacted to the thoughts and the expression that another person has. And if you just reacted a different way, or approached it in a different manner, or took it into consideration a little bit more before you responded, I think the conversation could have gone another way. And I think I'm learning how to do that more and more as I get better at podcasting and better at conversations, learning how to just settle someone down and learning how to genuinely be a nice person. So where I don't want to like insult anybody. I don't want to be in a disagreement with someone. I want to discuss ideas.